Hi, I'm Tetron Studios, and this is how my indie game development project called Galactory almost ended entirely to conveyors. Galactory is a project I've been working on where you travel between different planets and dimensions to expand your factory and upgrade your exploration tools to venture further out into the cosmos. You can discover new elements, get quests from government civilizations, fight enemies, and much more. And currently the game is in a state that definitely matches that. Totally. Anyway, I was playtesting the game not that long ago, after rewriting the conveyors to make them more performant, and I noticed something. And what I noticed made me really mad. I found out that after rewriting the conveyors, after only placing about 500 of them down, even if they didn't push a single item, my FPS would be about a third of what it was originally. And because I'd just rewritten them, I really didn't want to do it, but unfortunately this just came down to a skill issue, and since that rewrite I had learned a lot of things and I was ready to have another crack at optimizing them. This time, I was actually planning to make them much more performant, allowing the player to place thousands of them without a massive FPS dip. On top of this performance increase I was working towards, I was also going to try my hardest to make the conveyors less buggy, as the old conveyors I was just talking about had a lot of spaghetti code that just made them really glitchy, with items going inside of each other, getting completely stuck, which just means they didn't move unless the player had some input, which isn't great for a factory game. So, I set out to make these changes, and on the first day, one of the ideas I really wanted to try out was to swap over from using the update function to an on-tick function. Just some background info on what I was doing previously, the update function runs code every frame, so if you're running at 200 FPS, it runs at 200 times per second. In contrast, I'll be using Minecraft as my example. Even if the user is running the game at, for example, 200 FPS, the game actually only runs updates 20 times per second. And I was going to use something quite similar for my game, and instead of running code on conveyors and machinery every single frame, I would run it roughly 40 times per second. I might change this in the future. Another approach I really wanted to take with this conveyor was to use a stoplight system. What I mean when I say this is that conveyors work sort of like a set of traffic lights at a road intersection. If there's 3 conveyors that all meet at one conveyor, they should all pass one item in clockwise order before going back to the first conveyor in that clockwise order. This enables item flow to be as equal as possible when there is multiple conveyors that meet at a single point. After this, I just made it so conveyors push items, as they previously didn't do this, and I was done with the rewrite. Now you may be asking, that never even came close to ending your project. And at this state, you're right, but I'll talk more on that later. It was now time to work on rewriting all the machinery that was currently in the game to work with the new conveyor. As currently, the new conveyor wouldn't push to these machines, and the machines couldn't interact with the conveyors. But this is where I made a terrible mistake. One night, I was in the shower. Yes, I think about things I can add to my game in the shower, and was thinking about ways I could make the conveyors more performant. Normally, when I think of performance, I think of improving code to make it run faster, but this time I decided to look at it differently. I thought about modifying the actual game design rather than the code, and I settled on an idea. Instead of a straight line of 50 different conveyors being 50 individual objects, I would do some weird crap to merge it into a singular object. This means that one object would only need to run one script instead of 50 different individual objects all having a script on them. Basically, in short terms, this would be a pretty big performance increase, and in theory it didn't seem like too big of a task, so I began working. Firstly, I had to modify the conveyor script to work around being scaled up and down, which only took a few hours, but I did eventually get it working in the scaled up state. But it was only now that I realized that I would need to add a lot of new build conditions. Basically, to accommodate for these new scaled up conveyors, I would need to modify my build script a lot. These changes would include allowing for placing one big scaled up object, deleting small segments of the big scaled up object, splicing the scaled up objects at points, and heaps of other small little things, and I did not realize how big of a task this would be. I first started working on some small features that were going to be added to the game at some point anyway, like making a rectangle and line build mode and delete mode that allowed for dragging over an area to build and delete things. And this is where I discovered one of my new least favorite tasks in game development: long sessions of transform math. Normally, I'm really good with math and I have a lot of fun doing it, but there was just something about transform math. It felt incredibly unpredictable and almost never, ever did what you thought you told it to do. This is probably just a severe case of skill issue, but I think there's just something challenging about transform math that I don't fully understand yet, even though I've been using Unity for a couple years and I thought I would be pretty good at it. Over time, I did learn to predict what was going to happen, but having to write so many little lines of scaling things up and moving things around was really boring in my opinion. I would spend hours in the editor staring at objects' positions and watching where they moved and how they moved to try and see what issues there were and figure out what I needed to do to fix them. This boring task had me leaving the project for weeks at a time, and I couldn't even open the project to try and do something else, because I just had that dread that I need to get this task completely finished for the game to be playable. Now, let's take a break while you ask yourself, if it would end the project, why the hell are you not doing something else instead? Okay, well, yeah, for some reason I have some weird condition where if I'm working on any task, it needs to be completely finished, or at least fully working, for me to move on to something else. I can tell you right now that I tried countless times to work on something else, but every single time I tried to do something else, I found myself losing motivation because there was still so much left of the conveyor scaling task that I had left to do. At one point, I almost took about a 2-month break to try and clear my mind, which could have led to me completely losing motivation and dropping the project entirely for something that I would have had more fun doing at the time. And after the trouble, after my big skill issue, I decided to spend a couple weeks pushing through these boring tasks that I desperately wanted to avoid. And it was working. Now, I'm not going to tell you right now that it's finished, since I still have multiple build conditions I need to write, and there still is some bugs with building the lines of conveyors, but since it's in a working state, I finally found some time to work on other features that I'm really excited to add. Now, the main focus of all this drama. Did I make it as performant as I expected? Well, actually, yes. What I expected was a fairly small increase like previously. Sure, it would be quite noticeable, but wouldn't run perfectly on massive scales, and I think I achieved my goal. I mean, it's not perfect, but it honestly runs a lot better than I ever expected. And from now on, it's going to be a goal for me to have it so every future devlog has an optimization section, because optimizing is just so important for a factory game. Unfortunately, I don't have any footage or builds of game pre-optimizing, but all I can say is that it's heaps more performant, and I think for now it will be performant enough. Before I go into the rest of the stuff, please consider subscribing to my channel and liking this video, as it helps out a big ton, especially for such a small little bob like me. Anyway, now that all of that drama is over, I want to go over all of my other changes to the game. First off, I began work, but have not finished, on revamping the export system in the game. Previously, the player could open up the inventory and press the dollar icon in the bottom left of an item, which would open up a menu to sell the item. You could then select how much you want to ship and send it off to who knows where and make money. This transaction would take a certain amount of time depending on how many items you shipped, and honestly, I wasn't a big fan of this system. So, my idea for a new system was to have it so the player could unlock boats they could use to ship items, each with different item capacities and speeds. The player could choose where they want to send the items, with each factory having their own trade-offs. Some factories would pay more for items but be really far away, while other factories might pay less for the items but be really close. For example, I might use a cargo ship with a capacity of 500 items and a speed of 10 kilometers to ship 500 stone to Bob's Stoneyard. The thing I liked about this new system was that it gave the player some choices in where they could ship their items, to make the game just that little bit more fun. On top of this system also accommodated for storage containers. Storage containers are ways the player can send items from their factory to go into storage so they can hold items. And as of writing this, I am still contemplating whether this feature will stay in the game or not, as I'm considering making the factory store an infinite amount of items, which will render storage useless. And as of today, the export system isn't completely finished, and I do have a lot of ideas to make it better, and according to my Miro board, which is quite inaccurate, I should be working on and finishing the export system in January of 2025, which actually sounds further away than it is, to be honest. I also very recently made a localization system, and if you don't know what that means, it's basically a way that you can translate your game into different languages. Right now I'm just going to use AI translations, but I'm not going to talk too much on the localization system, because it is pretty boring for a devlog like this. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I am currently working on the Underworld, which is the main combat area, so I'll see you guys in about 1 month's time to talk about that, which I am really excited about. Thank you so much for watching, and have a good rest of your day.